Hello, friends. I'm Harry. Here, we unearth lost letters, raw echoes of love, pain, and secrets buried by time. Join me as we travel through time and feel the love, regret, and hope inked on these forgotten pages. Lost letter. To the nurse who held my hand. This letter was discovered in 1976 during renovation of a former military hospital near Verdun, France. Found wrapped in oilcloth inside a cavity in the wall of what had been a medical ward, the letter was written on pages torn from a medical journal in German with ink that had faded to brown. It has been translated from the original German. The letter was addressed simply to the angel, but was never sent. November 14th, 1918, Field Hospital 47, somewhere near Verdun. Meine liebe Unbekannte, my dear unknown one, I do not know your name. I do not know your face, not really, though I have tried 1,000 times to piece it together from the fragments I remember through the morphine haze and the fever dreams. I do not know if you were French or British or American. Do not know if you are still alive. Do not even know if you remember the German boy with the shattered leg who held onto your hand as if it were the only thing keeping him tethered to this world. But I remember your touch. That is what I want to tell you, what I need to tell you before they move me again, before this war finally ends and we all scatter back to whatever remains of our former lives. I remember your touch, and it saved me in ways that have nothing to do with medicine. It has been 3 days since you disappeared from this ward. 3 days since I woke from surgery to find a different nurse beside my bed. Older, efficient, kind enough, but with hands that felt nothing like yours. When I asked about you, she looked confused and said there had been no young nurse matching your description working this section. Perhaps you were transferred. Perhaps you were reassigned to another ward, another hospital, another group of broken boys who need the particular grace you carry in your fingertips. Perhaps. Or perhaps you were one of the nurses killed in the shelling 2 nights ago when the artillery found the range to the field hospital despite the red crosses painted on every surface. Perhaps you are buried now in the small cemetery behind the chapel with only a wooden cross to mark where your kindness came to rest. I do not want to think about that possibility, but in this place, in these times, one learns to think about the unthinkable. One learns to hold beauty lightly because beauty here is always temporary, always fragile, always one shall burst away from becoming memory. But for 3 days, was it 3 days? Time moves strangely when you are lost in pain and fever. For 3 days, you were there. 3 days when your presence made this place of blood and antiseptic and dying young men feel almost like a sanctuary. I should tell you how I came to be here, shouldn't I? Though it is not a particularly interesting story, not the kind of heroic tale they will tell in the newspapers or the history books. Just another German boy who stepped on something he shouldn't have stepped on, who found himself flying through the air in a shower of earth and metal and his own blood. I was 19. Am 19, though I feel much older now, as if pieces of my youth were scattered across that muddy field along with pieces of my leg. I had been a soldier for 8 months, though I had been a boy for much longer than that, a boy who loved mathematics and music, who played violin badly, but with enthusiasm, who had never been farther from home than the next village over. The war changed that, of course. The war has changed everything. They found me 3 hours after the shell exploded, half buried in a crater that smelled of cordite and death. I remember fragments, voices speaking French, the sensation of being lifted, the overwhelming relief of hands that were trying to help rather than harm. Then darkness, and when I woke again, I was here, in this ward that could belong to any army, any nation, because pain and healing speak a language that transcends the boundaries we draw on maps. My leg was, well, it was mostly still attached, which the doctors seemed to consider a minor miracle. Shattered bone, torn muscle, embedded shrapnel, but salvageable with enough time and care and luck. They gave me morphine for the pain, sulfa powder for infection, and told me I would live to see the end of this war. What they could not give me was hope. What they could not heal was the part of me that had seen too much, lost too much, had watched too many friends disappear into the hungry earth of France. That is where you came in. I cannot remember when you first appeared beside my bed. The days after surgery blur together like watercolors in rain. But I remember becoming aware of your presence gradually, the way dawn creeps across the sky. First, just a suggestion of light, then something real and warm and undeniable. You had small hands. That is the first clear memory I have of you. Small hands with short, practical nails. Hands that moved with confidence and gentleness as you changed bandages, adjusted pillows, measured out medicine. Hands that knew their work but had not yet become calloused by it, had not yet lost their essential softness. When the pain was very bad, and it was often very bad despite the morphine, you would take my hand in both of yours and simply hold it. You did not speak at first, did not try to offer comfort with words that would have been meaningless anyway. You just held on, as if your touch could somehow absorb some of the hurt, could remind my body that not all contact with the world had to involve suffering. Your touch was cool. I remember that distinctly. Cool and dry and infinitely gentle, in a place where everything was hot. The fever, the infection, the rage and despair that burned in all of us. Your cool touch was like water to a dying man. I tried to learn things about you from those touches, the way a blind man learns to read with his fingertips. You wore no ring, which made me wonder if you were unmarried, or if you simply could not wear jewelry while working. Your skin was soft, but not pampered. You had done work with your hands before nursing, but not the hard, coarsening labor of the fields. Sometimes, when you thought I was sleeping, you would trace patterns on the back of my hand with your finger. Nothing elaborate, just simple shapes, circles, figure eights, what might have been flowers. It was unconscious, I think, the way one might doodle while lost in thought. But those gentle tracings became the anchor that kept me from drifting away entirely into the darkness that beckoned from the edges of consciousness. The first time I heard your voice clearly, not filtered through fever dreams or morphine haze. You were humming, just under your breath, so quietly I might have imagined it, a melody I did not recognize, but which sounded like something my mother might have sung while working in her garden. You were changing the bandage on my leg, unwrapping the old dressings with careful precision, cleaning the wound with movements that spoke of practice and patience. I suppose I made some sound, not quite a cry, but not quite a breath either, when you reached a particularly tender spot. "Je suis désolé," you whispered. "I am sorry." And then, perhaps realizing I might not understand French, you tried again in careful accented English. "I am sorry. It will be finished soon." Your voice was lower than I had expected, with a slight roughness that suggested you had done your share of crying in the days before we met. But there was warmth in it, too, a quality that made me think of honey and firelight and other things that belonged to the world before the war. "It is all right," I managed to say, the words scraping against my throat like sand. "You are gentle." You paused in your work and looked at me directly for the first time since I had been fully conscious. I wish I could describe your eyes properly, could give you some sense of how they appeared to me in that moment. Brown, I think, or perhaps green. The morphine made colors unreliable, but kind, unmistakably kind, with the particular sadness that comes from seeing too much suffering and still choosing to care. "You are German?" you said. "Not an accusation, just an observation." "Yes," I admitted, wondering if this would change everything, if kindness extended to an enemy soldier would suddenly be withdrawn. But you just nodded and returned to your work. "The bullet," you said, concentrating on a particularly stubborn piece of bandage, "it does not know nationality." Such a simple statement, but it contained within it an entire philosophy of mercy. The bullet does not know nationality. Pain does not recognize uniform colors. Blood flows the same, regardless of which flag waves above it. After that, we spoke more frequently, though always in whispers and always briefly. The ward was full of men from many armies, American, French, British, even a few Germans like myself, and the nurses moved between us all with practiced neutrality. But our conversations felt different, more personal, as if we were sharing secrets rather than simply exchanging pleasantries. You told me your name once, but I was fighting a fever at the time, and the syllables scattered before I could capture them. Something with soft vowels, something that sounded like music when you pronounced it. I have spent hours since trying to remember, trying to piece together the sounds, but they remain just beyond reach, like trying to recall a dream upon waking. You told me you had been nursing for 6 months, that you had come to France from somewhere. The morphine took that detail too, left me with only the impression of distance traveled, of a young woman who had left safety behind to tend to strangers in a land at war. When I asked why leave home, why choose this work, why risk yourself for boys like me, you were quiet for so long I thought you had not heard the question. Finally, you said, "Because someone must." Then, after another pause, "Because if I can ease one moment of pain, if I can help one person feel less alone, then perhaps some good can come from all this terrible." I wanted to tell you then that you had already succeeded, that in the space of a few days you had helped me feel less alone than I had in months. I wanted to explain that your presence had given me something to hold on to besides despair, that your touch had reminded me there was still gentleness in the world despite everything I had seen. But the words seemed too large, too important, to speak aloud in a place where privacy was measured in inches and conversations could be overheard by dying men in neighboring beds. Instead, I simply said, "Thank you." You squeezed my hand then, just once, quickly. "Rest now," you said. "Tomorrow will be better." I did not believe you then. How could tomorrow be better in a world that had produced such efficient methods for destroying young bodies, young dreams, young lives? How could tomorrow be anything but another day of pain and loss and the slow, grinding erosion of hope? But you were right in a way. Not because the war had changed, not because the shells had stopped falling, or the dying had stopped dying. Tomorrow was better because you were in it, because I would wake knowing that somewhere in this ward of horrors was a person who had chosen kindness over indifference, compassion over convenience. For 3 days, you were the best part of tomorrow. I began to measure time by your appearances, not by the clock on the wall or the changing of the guard or the regular intervals of medication, but by the sound of your footsteps approaching my bed, by the rustle of your uniform as you leaned over to check my temperature, by the soft exhalation you made when concentrating on some particularly delicate task. You had a habit of tucking a strand of hair behind your ear when you were thinking hard about something. The gesture was so unconscious, so natural, that I doubt you were even aware of doing it. But I watched for it, waited for it, treasured it as evidence of your humanity in a place where it was easy to forget that nurses, like patients, were people with their own thoughts and worries and small, endearing habits. Your hair, incidentally, smelled of lavender, not perfume. There was no room for such luxuries in a field hospital, but the kind of gentle, herbal scent that suggested you had somehow managed to find real soap, or perhaps that you carried sachets of dried flowers in your pockets the way some soldiers carried photographs or lucky coins. That scent became precious to me when you leaned close to adjust my pillow or check my temperature. When you bent over my leg to examine the healing wound, I would breathe as deeply as I dared, storing up that clean, sweet smell to counter the hospital odors of carbolic acid and blood and the particular staleness that clings to places where too many people are confined in too small a space. Lavender made me think of my mother's garden, of summer evenings before the war when the greatest worry in my life was whether I would pass my mathematics examination or whether Emma Schuyler would dance with me at the village festival. How strange that a scent in a stranger's hair could carry such power, could transport a wounded soldier back to a time when the world made sense and tomorrow held promise instead of only uncertainty. But then everything about you was strange and wonderful in that way. The way you hummed while working, always just under your breath, but with enough melody to suggest songs I wanted to hear completely. The way you would straighten your shoulders when preparing for some difficult task, as if drawing strength from your own spine. The way you would pause sometimes in the middle of routine duties, just for a moment, and look out the small window at the end of the ward as if remembering something beautiful. I invented stories about what you saw in those moments. Perhaps you were thinking of home, of people who loved you and worried about you and waited for letters that might never come. Perhaps you were remembering better times, peacetime pursuits, walks in gardens, evenings by firesides, conversations that did not revolve around wound care and pain management. Or perhaps you were simply gathering strength for the next task, the next patient, the next small act of mercy in an endless series of small acts of mercy. I hoped it was the last. I hoped you were finding in those quiet moments some reservoir of peace that would sustain you through all the days to come, all the wounded boys you would tend, all the hands you would hold as they reached toward either healing or release. On the second night, or was it the third, I woke to find you sitting beside my bed in the darkness, not working, not checking vitals or changing bandages, just sitting. Your hands were folded in your lap, and you were staring at nothing in particular, wearing the expression of someone who had forgotten, temporarily, to maintain the professional composure that was so necessary in such a place. You looked very young in that moment, young and tired and perhaps a little lost, as if the weight of all the suffering you witnessed had accumulated in your shoulders, behind your eyes, in the set of your mouth. I wanted to say something comforting, wanted to offer you some small portion of the kindness you had shown me. But what comfort could a wounded German soldier offer to a nurse who had seen more death and pain than any young woman should ever have to see? Instead, I simply reached out and touched your hand where it lay on the blanket. Just touched it, the way you had touched mine during the worst moments of pain. You startled slightly, as if you had forgotten you were not alone. Then you looked at me, and in the dim light from the single lamp at the end of the ward, I saw you smile. Not the professional smile you wore while working, but something smaller and more real. Something that was just for me. "Cannot sleep?" you asked in your careful English. "I sleep too much," I said. "The morphine. It makes me dream strange dreams." You nodded as if you understood. "What do you dream about?" I considered telling you about the nightmares, the shells and the mud and the friends who had stopped answering when I called their names. But that seemed wrong somehow, seemed like an unfair burden to place on someone who already carried so much. "Music," I said instead, which was partly true. "My violin. I wonder if I will still be able to play when—" I gestured vaguely at my bandaged leg. "You played violin?" "Badly," I admitted, "but with great enthusiasm. My mother used to say I made up in volume what I lacked in skill." That earned me another smile, this one with a hint of laughter in it. "I would like to hear you play someday," you said. "Even badly, especially badly. Music is music." It was such a simple thing to say, but it contained within it an assumption that stunned me, that there would be a someday, that I would heal, that I would leave this place and return to a life that included music and mothers and all the ordinary joys I had thought were lost forever. "Would you really?" I asked. "Like to hear me play?" "Yes," you said, and I believed you meant it. It reminds us that beauty is still possible, even here, even now. We sat in comfortable silence after that, your hand still under mine, both of us listening to the quiet sounds of the ward, the breathing of sleeping men, the distant rumble of artillery, the soft footsteps of other nurses making their rounds. It was perhaps the most peaceful moment I had experienced since arriving in France. Not because the war had stopped, not because the pain had disappeared, but because for a few minutes I was not just a wounded soldier or a piece of damaged equipment to be repaired. I was simply a person, sitting with another person, sharing the strange intimacy that can exist between strangers who find themselves thrown together by circumstances beyond their control. When you finally rose to continue your rounds, you squeezed my hand gently. "Sleep now," you said. "Dream of music." And I did. For the first time in weeks, my dreams were filled not with explosions and death, but with melodies half-remembered from childhood, with the sound of my violin singing its imperfect songs in my mother's parlor, while she smiled and forgave my wrong notes. The next morning, I woke feeling more human than I had since the shell had scattered pieces of my leg across a muddy field. The pain was still there, would always be there to some degree, but it felt manageable, survivable. You appeared at my bedside with breakfast, thin porridge and weak coffee, and a slice of bread that was probably stale but tasted like a feast to someone who had been living on morphine and hope. "Good morning," you said, and there was something different in your voice, something lighter. "You look better today." "I feel better," I said and meant it. "Thank you for last night, for sitting with me. You busied yourself with adjusting my pillows, but I caught the faint flush that colored your cheeks." "It was nothing," you said. "No," I said, "it was everything." You paused in your work and looked at me directly. For a moment, I thought you might say something important, something that would help me understand who you were and what this connection between us meant. But then another patient called for assistance, and the moment passed. That was our last real conversation. By afternoon, the fever had returned, and I spent the next day and night lost in delirium. When I finally surfaced back into clarity, you were gone. The other nurse, Sister Margaret, I think her name was, told me there had been some confusion about staffing, that several nurses had been reassigned without notice. But she seemed genuinely puzzled when I described you as if the person I was asking about had never existed at all. Perhaps you were simply moved to another ward. Perhaps you are somewhere else in this vast complex of medical facilities, holding the hand of some other wounded boy, offering the same quiet comfort to some other soldier who has forgotten what kindness feels like. I hope that is the case. I hope you are safe and well and continuing to prove that beauty is still possible, even here, even now. But I needed to write this letter anyway, needed to put into words what your brief presence meant to me, even if you never read these words, even if you never know how profoundly you affected one German boy who had given up believing in tomorrow. You saved me, not just my leg, though perhaps you helped with that too, but something more essential. You saved my faith in human goodness, my belief that compassion can survive even in places designed for destruction. You reminded me that beneath the uniforms and the national flags and the artificial divisions that have set us all to killing each other, we are simply people. People who hurt and hope and dream of music and mourn the loss of innocence and find unexpected grace in the touch of a stranger's hand. I do not know your name, do not know your face, do not know if you are French or British or American or something else entirely. I do not know if you think of me at all, if the German boy with the shattered leg has left any impression on your memory. But I will carry you with me always. In every day that I wake grateful to be alive, in every moment when I choose kindness over indifference, in every time I hear music and remember that beauty is still possible despite everything this war has tried to teach us about the darker possibilities of human nature. When I return home, and I will return home now, thanks in part to you, I will play my violin again. Badly, perhaps, and certainly differently than before, but with the understanding that music is music, that every imperfect note is still a small victory against the silence, and sometimes when I am playing those imperfect songs, I will think of a young woman whose name I never learned, whose face I barely remember, but whose touch saved me from drowning in despair. I will play for you, meine liebe Unbekannte, for your gentle hands and your cool touch and your belief that someone must choose to ease pain rather than cause it. I will play for the lavender scent of your hair and the way you hummed while working and the assumption you made that there would be a someday worth preparing for. I will play for the 3 days when an angel disguised as a nurse reminded a broken German boy that he was still underneath everything human. This letter was discovered during a renovation of a building that had served as a military hospital during World War I. According to hospital records, several German prisoners of war were treated there in late 1918, though specific patient names were not always recorded. No record exists of the nurse described in the letter, though this is not unusual given the chaotic conditions of the final months of the war and the informal arrangements that often governed medical staffing at frontline hospitals. The letter bears no signature or identifying information beyond what is contained in the text itself. The following letter was found in a cedar chest, tucked inside a quilt, folded with sprigs of dried lavender. The paper is yellowed, edges brittle, handwriting loops uneven, as if written by candlelight. A grandmother writes to a granddaughter who was not born. My dearest girl, if you're reading this, I suppose I've become nothing but a name stitched into a family Bible, or a face in a photograph you've been told to call Grandma. They'll say I had your father's eyes, your mother's stubborn chin. They'll say, I loved roses and sang off key to the radio. But they won't tell you the weight of me, the parts I swallowed down like stones. I'm writing to you from the kitchen window of my little house on Sycamore Street. It's a Tuesday, I think. The clock stopped ticking last week, and I've yet to wind it. Time feels flexible here now. The doctors gave me until Christmas, but we both know how these things go. Promises, like milk left too long on the sill, curdle. You're not even a whisper yet. Your father is 19, all knobby elbows and silence, smoking cigarettes behind the garage with that Wilson girl. Your mother, well, she's a story for another day. What matters is this: I'm 68 years old, and I've never held a grandchild, never pressed a sticky cheek to mine, or saved a first tooth in a matchbox. The doctor said my heart's grown thin as onion paper. But oh, how it aches tonight. Let me start at the beginning, even if it's the middle of the story. I was born in 1879 in a house that smelled of beeswax and coal smoke. My mother, Ellen, had hands like cracked leather from lye soap, but she'd smooth my hair at night and hum In the Sweet By and By. We had a collie named Scout who slept on my feet, his fur matted from chasing squirrels. When I was 7, he chased a rabbit into the road. The wagon wheel made a sound I still hear sometimes, like a branch snapping under ice. I buried him under the big maple, planted a rose bush there. The roses are gone now, but I still touch the spot when I walk past. You'll think me foolish, but I've kept a jar of buttons from her sewing box all these years. They're in the blue tin under the floorboard, third plank from the hearth. If the floor's still there, if the house is. There's a brass button from her Sunday coat, a tiny pearl one from my christening gown. I used to line them up on the windowsill and pretend they were my children. I met your grandfather Henry at a harvest dance in 1896. He wore a celluloid collar so stiff it left a red ring on his neck, and he'd brought a jug of his father's cider. His hands were warm from the bowl when he passed it to me. "You're the only girl here who doesn't giggle when I talk," he said. I didn't tell him it was because I was too busy staring at the way his cowlick stuck up in the back, like a little flag. We married in April, lilacs and mud everywhere. I wore a dress my mother sewed from flour sacks, bleached white. She cried into her handkerchief and said, "You'll be happy, Ruth. You'll see." For years, we tried for babies. I drank bitter teas, chamomile, and something Henry's aunt swore by, made with dandelion roots. I'd lie with my feet propped on pillows, counting the cracks in the ceiling, while Henry sat by the bed, holding my hand. Let doctors with cold instruments poke and prod. One of them, a man with a mustache that smelled like pipe tobacco, said, "It's a matter of patience, Mrs. Miller. Your grandfather would hold my hair back from the chamber pot and say, 'Next time, Ruth. Next time.'" There was no next time, but here's the secret I've carried. I did hold a child once, briefly, a girl born too soon in the winter of 1904. The snow was so deep that week, the milkman couldn't get through. I'd been feeling poorly, but I ignored it. Figured it was just the cold. Then the pains came, sharp as needles. Henry ran for the midwife, Mrs. O'Reilly, who lived 2 miles up the road. By the time she arrived, I was already pushing. She was tiny, my girl, fit in my palm like a sparrow, blue as a mussel shell. Her fingers were curled like she was trying to hold on. Mrs. O'Reilly wrapped her in flannel and took her away. "She's with the angels now," she said, but I didn't believe in angels then. Henry buried her under the big maple next to Scout. We never named her. I still don't know if that was kindness or cruelty. I wonder if you'd have her laugh, her father's cowlick. The house creaks tonight. The wind's got a voice. It hisses through the keyhole like someone trying not to cry. I've lit the last of the coal oil. The radio's been silent since the war ended, but I keep it on for the static. It's better than the quiet. Sometimes I turn the dial and catch snippets. A baseball game, a choir singing, a man talking about Truman. I pretend it's you, talking back. You'd laugh at my kitchen. The icebox rattles like an old man's cough. I've got a chipped teacup with violets painted inside. Drank my first coffee from it, my last. The handle's cracked, glued with a sliver of eggshell and glue. There's a stain on the ceiling I've stared at so long it's become a Rorschach. Lately, it looks like 2 hands clasped. I like to think they're my mother's, reaching down to say, "I'm here." Do you know the smell of rain on a hot pavement? I used to love that. It reminds me of summers in the 20s when the town would throw block parties. We'd drag the piano onto the sidewalk, and Mrs. Donahue would play "Yes, We Have No Bananas," while the men drank lemonade and talked about Ford's new Model T. Now it reminds me of the factory where I worked during the Great War, stitching uniforms until my fingers bled. The women there sang Over There, between mouthfuls of liverwurst sandwiches. We'd trade tips on hiding gray hairs with burnt coffee. You'd have liked them, I think. Mabel, the girl who sat next to me, had a son in France. She'd bring in photos of him in his uniform, grinning with a cigar. "He's going to come home and marry a pretty girl," she'd say. "Give me grandbabies." I never told her I envied her. I've started leaving notes for you around the house. In the flour canister, "Your mother loved butterscotch. She'd sneak it from the jar when she thought I wasn't looking." Inside the hollowed-out Reader's Digest, "Your father learned to waltz for a girl named Clara. She had red hair, wore too much rouge. He practiced in the barn, stepping on the cats. They still hiss at him." Between the pages of Little Women, I buried a locket with your baby picture in it. The one where you're frowning, like you're already disappointed in the world. If you find it, wear it sometimes. Let it be a reminder that even when you're cross, you're loved. Silly, I know, but it's a kind of thread. A way to say, I was here. I noticed. Your grandfather died in 35. Pneumonia. He'd been coughing since the stock market crash. Couldn't afford a doctor, so he just kept working at the mill, hacking into his handkerchief. I'd find blood spots on his pillow in the morning. The last week, he was delirious. Kept asking for his mother, who'd been dead 20 years. I washed his body myself. Hummed In the Sweet By and By like my mother did. His hands were cold, but I kept them folded on his chest anyway. The funeral was on a Tuesday. I wore the violet hat he'd given me for our anniversary, the one with the feather that always tickled my ear. But then the radio started talking about another war, and your father enlisted, and I'd lie awake thinking, what if he meets a girl? What if he gives her a ring? What if she has a girl with his cowlick? Foolish, right? Clinging to a future I'd never taste. There's a maple outside my window. Its leaves are turning now gold as old pennies. I used to press them in books for your father. He'd take them to school, call them treasures. Now the branches scrape the glass like fingernails. Last night, a squirrel nested in the crook. Kept me up with its scratching. I thought, maybe that's you, little one, trying to get in. I should tell you about the day I knew I'd never meet you. It was a Thursday. I'd gone to the market for eggs. Mrs. Pete behind the counter said, "You look peaked, Ruth. You eating?" I bought a lemon cake instead. On the walk home, a little girl in a yellow coat ran past, pigtails bouncing. She dropped a paper doll. I picked it up, called after her, but she didn't hear. The doll had a frilly dress drawn in crayon. I stood there holding it, and suddenly I couldn't breathe. Not from the heart. This was deeper. A hollow place opening up like a sinkhole. I thought, that's it. That's all I'll ever get. A paper doll left behind. So I came home and started this letter. I don't know if I'll finish it. The pen's scratchy. My hand shakes. But if I do, I'll tuck it in the quilt I've been stitching since your father was small. The one with the star pattern. I started it the day he left for the army, stitching each star for a prayer. There are 47 stars now, one for every day he's been gone. If you're reading this, it means someone found it. Maybe your mother, maybe a cousin, maybe you, grown and curious, digging through dust. If that's the case, if you're real and breathing and holding this paper, know this. You were loved before you were born. You were loved in the gaps between heartbeats, in the steam off morning coffee, in the way I'd hum off key to the radio and pretend it was you singing back. You would have had my laugh. It's a loud, snorting thing, like a horse clearing its throat. Your grandfather used to say it could startle the chickens. Your father has it too. He tries to hide it, but I've heard him. Eat the cake, drink the wine, kiss the boys or girls, times change, who make your knees weak. And if you ever find that locket, wear it, not for me, for the girl who dropped the paper doll, for the part of you that's still a child even when you're grown. I'm tired now. The clock's stopped at 2:17. The radio's playing Stardust, your grandfather's favorite. He'd hum it while he shaved off-key as a crow. I can still see him leaning over the sink, soap on his cheek, saying, "Come on, Ruth, sing with me. Don't forget to water the geraniums. They're on the sill, stubborn as sin. Red ones, because I like how they look against the white curtains. All my love, Grandma Ruth." Postscript. There's a jar of peach preserves in the pantry. Don't let your mother throw it out. She'll say it's past its time, but preserves don't expire. They just get sweeter. And if you ever miss me, go to the maple. Sit under it. I'll be there in the rustle of the leaves. Lost Letters. A letter from Thomas to Eleanor, 1943. My dearest Eleanor, it's late or early, depending on how you reckon time out here. The sky's gone all bruised, purple and heavy, like it's holding its breath before a storm. I'm sitting on a crate in what passes for a tent, with a stub of pencil I sharpened with my pocket knife and a scrap of paper that smells faintly of diesel and damp wool. The boys are asleep, or pretending to be, snoring, muttering, one of them crying soft in his dreams. I don't blame him. This place, this war, it chews up your insides and spits 'em out different. I'm writing this to you, my love, though I don't know if it'll ever find you. Maybe it's just for me, to keep you close, to keep from losing my fool head. I miss you, Ellie. God, I miss you. I miss the way your hair smells like lavender soap when you lean close, the way your laugh catches like a hiccup when you're trying to be serious. I miss the way you'd hum that old Bing Crosby tune, Moonlight Becomes You, while you pinned laundry on the line, your apron flapping like a flag in the summer breeze. I can still see you out there in the backyard of your ma's house, the grass all golden and the air thick with honeysuckle. You'd turn and squint at me, one hand shading your eyes, and say, "Thomas Reed, you gonna help? Or just stand there gawking like a lovesick calf?" I'd laugh, and you'd toss a wet dish rag at me, and for a minute the world was perfect. It ain't perfect here, ain't even close. The air's sour with mud and gunpowder, and the cold seeps into your bones like it's got a personal grudge. We're somewhere in France. I can't say where, not that I know exactly anyhow. The maps don't make sense half the time, and the officers shout orders like they're mad at the rain for falling. It rains a lot, Ellie. The kind of rain that don't just fall but hammers, like it's trying to wash us all away. My boots are never dry, and my socks, well, let's just say they're more whole than sock now. I keep thinking of your ma's kitchen, the way it smelled of fresh bread and coffee, the linoleum warm under my feet. I'd give anything for a slice of that bread now, slathered with that churned butter you used to make, the kind that tasted like clover and home. I keep your picture in my breast pocket, the one you gave me before I shipped out. It's creased and soft at the edges now, from me taking it out too often. You're standing by that old oak in the town square, wearing that blue dress with the little white flowers. Your smile's a bit shy, like you weren't sure about the camera, but your eyes, they're all fire and mischief. I look at that picture when the shells start falling, when the ground shakes and the air tastes like metal. I look at it and think, that's my Ellie. That's what I'm coming back to. Only, sometimes, I'm not so sure I am coming back. I don't say that to scare you, love. I need to say it somewhere, and this paper's the only place that'll listen. You remember Rusty, don't you? That mangy red mutt that followed me home from the mill one day? You called him a flea-bitten nuisance, but you'd sneak him scraps of bacon when you thought I wasn't looking. I think about him, too, running circles in your ma's yard, barking at nothing but the wind. I wonder if he's still there, waiting for me. I wonder if you're waiting, too. I know you said you would, that day at the train station when you pressed your handkerchief into my hand. It's still in my kit, folded neat, though it don't smell like your perfume no more, just dust and time. You said, Thomas, you come back to me, you hear? Don't you dare let those Germans keep you. And I promised I would, but promises out here feel like trying to hold water in your hands. It just slips through. I'm scared, Ellie, not of the bullets or the bombs, though Lord knows they're enough to make a man's heart stutter. I'm scared of forgetting the sound of your voice, the way you say my name like it's a song. I'm scared of the days piling up, each one taking me further from you, from us. I try to hold on to the little things, the way you'd braid your hair before bed, the click of your knitting needles when you were making that scarf for me last winter, the one I never got to wear because I shipped out in spring. I can still see you sitting by the radio, listening to the shadow, your eyes wide like a kid's, even though you'd heard the episode before. You'd say, Thomas, hush, I'm listening. And I'd tease you till you threw a pillow at me. I'd give anything to have you throw a pillow at me now. There's a fella in my unit, Private Malone, who's got a girl back home too. He talks about her all the time. Mary, her name is. He says she writes him every week, and he reads her letters out loud sometimes, when the night's quiet and we're all too tired to sleep. Her letters are full of ordinary things, how the roses in her garden are blooming, how her little brother caught a fish in the creek, how she burned a pie because she was reading a book instead of watching the oven. Those letters, they're like a rope, pulling him back to the world. I listen, and I smile, and I nod. But inside, I'm aching because I ain't got a letter from you in months. I don't blame you, Ellie. I know the mail's a mess, what with ships sinking and roads bombed out. I know you're writing, or I hope you are. I just wish I could hold one of those letters, see your handwriting looping across the page, smell the paper that's been in your hands. I wrote you a letter last month, or maybe the month before. Time's slippery out here. I don't know if it got to you. I told you about the French kid who gave me an apple, how it was the sweetest thing I'd tasted since your ma's peach cobbler. I told you about the church we passed, half ruined, but with a stained glass window still shining, like it was too stubborn to break. I don't know if I'll write this one proper enough to send, or if I'll even get the chance. The way things are going, I might just tuck it in my pocket with your picture, let it keep me company till I can see you again. I keep thinking about our plans, Ellie. The house we were going to build, the one with the big porch, so we could sit out evenings and watch the fireflies. You wanted a swing, remember? Said you'd sit there with a glass of lemonade and read your novels while I fixed up the garden. I wasn't much for gardening, but I'd have done it for you. I'd have planted roses or daisies or whatever you wanted just to see you smile when they bloomed. We were gonna have kids, too. 2, maybe 3. Though you said you'd settle for one if he had my eyes. I hope he would have had yours instead, all bright and green like new leaves in spring. I can still see that house in my head, clear as day, even with the mud and the smoke and the noise all around me. It's like a lighthouse, that house, keeping me from getting lost. But there's a part of me, a mean, quiet part, that wonders if that house will ever be more than a dream. The war's got no end I can see, and every day it takes another piece of me. Not my body, though I've got scars now I didn't have when I left. It's my heart, Ellie, my hope. I see things I won't write down, not because I can't, but because I don't want you to carry them. Boys younger than me gone in a flash, villages turned to rubble, A woman I saw yesterday standing in the ruins of her house, holding a broken teacup like it was all she had left. I don't want you to know that world. I want you to stay in the one with honeysuckle and laundry lines and Rusty chasing his tail. I'm trying to be the man you deserve, the one who comes home and builds that house and makes you laugh till your sides hurt. But some days, I feel like I'm fading, like the Thomas you knew's getting buried under all this dirt and death. I don't say that to make you sad, love. I say it because you're the only one I can tell the truth to, even if it's just on this paper. You always saw me clear, even when I was a fool kid showing off at the county fair, trying to win you that stuffed bear. I missed every shot, but you kissed me anyway. Said you didn't need a bear when you had me. I'm holding on to that, Ellie. I'm holding on to you. There's a song stuck in my head, one I heard on a crackly radio in a barn we were hiding in a few weeks back. I'll be seeing you. Billie Holiday, I think. It's all about seeing someone you love in every little thing. The moonlight, the stars, the places you used to go. I hear it, and it's you I see. In the way the clouds part after a storm, in the flicker of a candle some French farmer gave us, in the way the wind sounds like your sigh when you're sleepy. I'll be seeing you, Ellie, even if I never make it home. I hope you know that. I hope you feel it somehow across all these miles and all this mess. I don't know how to end this letter. I keep wanting to say something big, something that'll make sense of all this, but I ain't got the words. I'm just a mill worker's son who fell in love with a girl who's too good for him. And now I'm out here trying to keep a promise I made on a train platform. If I don't come back, Ellie, don't let that house stay a dream. Build it. Sit on that porch. Drink that lemonade. Find someone who'll make you laugh, even if it ain't me. But if I do come back, and I'm trying, love, I'm trying so hard, I'll be running to you, mud and all, to hold you till the world feels right again. I love you, Eleanor, always will. Write me if you can. I'll be waiting. Yours, forever, Thomas. Postscript. If you see Rusty, give him a scratch behind the ears for me, and tell your ma her cobbler's still the best thing I ever ate.